Today I'd like to play a short demonstration on a flute that I recently had restored. This is an instrument that when I got it, I didn't actually think it would be a very good flute, but it had some interesting characteristics to it, which I will explain. But once I got the flute restored, it actually is an excellent flute. It's a 6-key flute, and it certainly is from Germany. It has no name on it at all, which is fairly typical of flutes, especially of lesser expensive flutes. Now, the thing that interested me in particular about this flute is the design of the key cups, which, as you can see, are kind of riveted onto the key itself in an interesting way. And one of the other places that we see this kind of key are on some of the 1832 conical Boehm flutes made by Theobald Boehm, and he used this style of key. I would guess that at least means this flute probably came from Munich, where Boehm was in residence. I suspect that both Boehm and whoever made this flute were using a particular key maker who made this design of key. The flute, as I mentioned, has 6 keys, so B flat, C, G sharp, long F, short F, and D sharp. That's a normal arrangement for a 6-key flute. It also has a tuning slide. The pitch range of this flute is quite excellent. It plays right around 440, just a little bit pulled out, which means it can easily play up to 442 or 443 and probably easily down to 435. So it's a very useful sort of key range. The tuning of the instrument is really quite good. My last demo was on the English 1-key flute by Reed, which is a really beautiful flute, but the tuning is pretty difficult with adjacent notes. Sometimes one note is sharp and one note is flat, and there's not enough time to adjust for that if you're playing a passage through those notes. And this flute really is quite well in tune. On a lot of flutes, one has to figure out how is the best way to play C's, especially C's in the first octave. And this flute is quite good in that it allows all 3 of the normal fingerings. So the fingering of 2 and 3, which is what comes from the Baroque flute and was still in use certainly at the very beginning of the 19th century. And then the fingering of 2, 4, 5, 6 key, which is the 2nd octave fingering, but also was used in the lower octave in the 19th century. On a lot of 19th century flutes, I find that fingering to be too sharp. People tend to use it, but I think it doesn't sound so good. Or the other option is to use the C key, which is fingered like a B, and then with this key with the right hand first finger. And all 3 of those really work quite nicely. So that gives you a lot of choices. The pieces that I'd like to play, I'll start with the excerpt from the Mozart Magic Flute arrangement by Berens. This is actually a very appropriate flute to play that on. It probably dates from pretty near the same time as that piece and from Germany as that music also was. And after that, I'm going to play a piece which I hadn't played before by a composer who I've enjoyed his flute music, Ludovic Leplus, obviously a French composer. He was kind of not on the first tier of French players. He was sort of a second flute or a third flute player, but in good orchestras. And he composed quite a bit of flute music, and a lot of it is written in a way that that mere mortal flute players can play it, whereas a lot of the French flute music that we get from Toulouse or Hugo, composers like that, is very virtuoso and requires quite a lot of work. So this was a piece that I found yesterday and was more or less able to play today, and it's just entitled La Péri, music from F. Burgmüller. I think that it's an opera arrangement, but I don't actually know. Probably La Péri is the name of the opera. At any rate, I hope that you enjoy this flute. It has a very full and rich sound. It's pretty easy to play, partially because the fingerings work in a pretty conventional manner. Thank you.